For more perspective on the significance of the Martin Luther King Jr. Monument and parallels between the African American rights movements and African anti-colonial movements, I am joined by Professor Sulayman Nyang of Howard University. Professor Nyang, welcome to In Focus.
Thank you very much.
In your words, what is the significance of this monument here in Washington, D.C.?
I think the monument is significant for a number of reasons, but I can just give you three. One is Dr. King is a major figure in American history, not only because he's an African American who became famous because he was able to bring great attention to the American problem, and the civil rights movement went to the highest level. The Nobel Peace Prize was the acknowledgement of his activities by outsiders in Scandinavia. But the fact that America moved forward under President Lyndon Johnson, when they had the Great Society and they tried to solve some of the problems by a Southern president in America where segregation played havoc to African Americans. Second thing, King's legacy affected millions of people around the world, particularly in America. Americans have moved psychologically, psychohistorically forward in race relations. Thirdly, King was able to use the Bible on the one hand and the American Constitution to do psychological judo on the races to move America forward.
Now, Professor Nyang, the civil rights movement coincided with the anti-colonialism movement in Africa. Analyzing that, some say there was mutual inspiration in these two movements.
Certainly,
what is your take?
Certainly, if you take the date, I identified three personalities in this drama. It's a very complicated drama. You have Dr. King, you have Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, and then you have Adam Clayton Powell, the congressman from Harlem. Truth be told, when they had the Bandung conference, Adam Clayton Powell wanted to go. There were forces opposed to him to going there. Adam Clayton Powell had contacts with Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah certainly had influence from Garvey, from Du Bois, and many other African-American intellectuals. So for that reason, when they had Ghana's independence, Dr. King was invited. If you read the memoir of the wife of Dr. King, you will get the story. Now, to cut the story short, one can just say that the African liberation movement and the civil rights movement interacted. King was influenced by what was being done by Kwame Nkrumah. Positive action against colonialism in Ghana was following Gandhi. King was following Gandhi. So here, Nkrumah, King, and Gandhi. And even the president of the United States today, his father's story, which goes back to Kenya, Tom Mboya. Unfortunately, he was killed too, in the same moment as King. So there is a connection in this struggle, that the struggle in Africa and the struggle to right movement were all trying to deal with racism, colonialism, imperialism, and injustice. In the end, King became a hero here. Tom Mboya, whose activities through the movement, which brought many Kenyans here, the airlift, including Obama's father, they all came here. And unfortunately, through a major historical drama, Tom Mboya, who brought them here, the Kennedys, who helped him, that's why Ted Kennedy supported Obama, because the Kennedys, they were fighting against Nixon. And Nixon was supported by the Teamsters Union. And the Kennedys wanted to get the AFL-CIO and the labor movement to support them. These are stories many people don't know. So if you talk about the African struggle and the African-American struggle were very much linked to the struggles within America. And it is not forgotten today that the son of Dr. King, speaking last night, I had him on radio talking about the legacies of his father. His father dealt with racism. America has moved forward racially, but there are still lingering doubts.
And we'll maybe revisit that. But in Africa, Nelson Mandela, for some reason, stands out as the towering symbol of liberation, although the situation in South Africa was a bit different. Dr. Martin Luther King is the most visible leader of the civil rights movement in America and most famous around the world. What was it about these two men?
No, Nelson Mandela is part of this drama. See, that's why I say it's a very complicated story. There are many personalities you can bring. Mandela, remember, he went to that all-African When Kwame Nkrumah became president of Ghana, he invited all the presidents of the Liberians, Ethiopians, North Africans, they all came. Then they have the unindependent countries. Tom Mboya became the chairman. He was a young man. You have Mandela, you have Kaunda, you have Cabral, and all these other people. Many of them were older than Tom Mboya. They became the chairman because a West Indian, George Patmore, who was the advisor to Kwame in the Bureau of African Affairs, they were the ones who put Tom Mboya there. Mandela was there. What happened to Mandela? When he came back from that conference in '61, they put him in jail for over 27 years.
That make him,
so he became the inheritor. Mandela was the inheritor of Albert Luthuli, who was the head of the civil rights movement, the first black to get the Nobel Peace Prize. Yeah. So King is a tradition. He's doing the running of Albert Luthuli. That's what King was doing.
Yes, Professor, I wish we have a lot of time, but briefly, nearly 50 years after the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King, if Dr. King was to rise up today and walk the streets of Washington, D.C., what do you think he will say?
No, I think King in his grave, looking at this side of the world, I mean our area here, King may be smiling. He said, the Bible is alive. Because there is a parallel between his story and the President of the United States right now. When King made that famous speech, I have been to the mountaintop. Moses is talking. I have been to the mountaintop. If you know the story of the Jewish people, they were in captivity in Egypt. Before the liberation of the Jews, Moses went to Mount Sinai. He went to the mountaintop. He was not going to lead the Jews to freedom. Who led them? Joshua. The Battle of Jericho, if you're a Christian.
And the parallel today.
Now, if you understand the Obama story, he has nothing to do with it. Obama has nothing to do with it. He was a little boy when Kennedy was president of the United States. His son, President Kennedy, was president in '61. Obama was a young kid. Now, what do you have to take into mind right now? Just to connect the dots. It's a very complicated story.
And
if you like Mandela,
we may have more to call you back.
Yeah, you have a very interesting. It's very complicated. Just to sort the story quickly, I will just tell you this. 40 years after Dr. King was killed in 1968. President Obama became president in 2008, 40 years.
Thank you.
So it's very biblical.
Thank you very much, Professor Nyang. Thanks a lot for joining us today on In Focus. Sulayman Nyang, Professor of African Studies at Howard University.